The knight in shining armor is one of the most heroic figures in history. Medieval knights were the vanguard of military technology. But they were also gladiators, whose fame was made in the most spectacular sporting event of the age, the tournament. Here, warriors jousted, risking death every time they collided. Now, with authentic weapons, 4 men will attempt to find out how they did it. Fighting man against man, exactly as their forebears did. A deadly spectacle not seen in centuries. Jousting. The image conjures up thundering horses, lances cracking on bodies, and ladies thrilled by their champions. Knights of the tournament inspired legends like King Arthur and St. George, a legacy still part of our culture today. But the myths are so potent, they obscure the fact we know very little about the real knights and their tournaments over 500 years ago.
Double pass, and then...
For 30 years, Mike Loades has studied and taught fighting for stage and screen.
Put the kick in the face in. It's very important to
he has staged numerous jousts, but always using the tricks of Hollywood stuntmen.
I've been jousting for 25 years now, except I haven't. What I've been doing, along with everybody else who jousts, is one version of a jousting effect. It's not really the real thing.
Ready, away!
Mike wants to go beyond the fake jousts held by historical reenactors. He wants to joust for real. To help him, Mike has assembled a team of historians, craftsmen, and volunteer knights.
Do the compare and contrast.
They'll rebuild and learn to fight in authentic armor.
Excellent.
They'll unravel the techniques of training, and they'll explore the crucial role played by women. In just 2 weeks, they will recreate an authentic tournament here in Pembroke Castle, Wales. An event not seen in centuries. To get started, Mike needs solid evidence of how a real tournament worked. At London's Royal College of Arms, historian Juliet Barker consults a seldom-seen 500-year-old manuscript.
This is just fabulous.
The Westminster Roll. It's about as long as a cricket pitch, nearly 60 feet of painted animal skin.
We've lost virtually all the information that there is about jousts and tournaments. They were so commonplace that people didn't bother to write them down because it was a given. Everybody understood what was going to happen. They were like football matches or baseball matches today. So it is very unusual to have surviving manuscripts which describe tournaments in any detail, and this manuscript is virtually unique.
The Westminster Roll illustrates a tournament in its most advanced form. It was held in celebration of the birth of King Henry VIII's son in 1511. People came from across Europe to witness the great event. The nobility took their seats in raised pavilions, including Catherine of Aragon, the first of King Henry's 6 queens. The best knights in Europe rode in to fight, but the central attraction was King Henry VIII himself, jousting. The Westminster Roll will be Mike's blueprint for his tournament, but he'll need more than old manuscripts to bring it to life.
We have this wonderful inheritance of this rich legacy of illuminated manuscripts showing us knights in all their wonderful colour and pageantry. But actually, at its centre was the physical experience of the grunt and sweat of wearing armour, of riding a prancing horse out of control, of smashing into each other. And the books can't give us that. And the books don't give us that. And the only way we can find out about that is by getting on those horses and doing it.
To do it, Mike has enlisted 4 volunteers to take part in his joust, all skilled horsemen from very different backgrounds. David Sheerin is a prize-winning horse rider and trainer from Scotland. Nick May is an army major. Rick Pellicano is a mounted policeman in Washington, D.C. And Dan Worth is a cowboy from Montana. These men have only 2 weeks' training before they'll joust just like knights of old. But first, Mike and Juliet need to discover what the rules of engagement will be.
Here we have a 16th century copy of the ordinances of John Tiptoft.
Discovered along with the Westminster Roll, this is an actual 500-year-old rule book for the joust.
One who breaks the most lances is the winner.
Spears.
So
they ought to be broken. Shall have first prize.
Yeah. So that's fine. That's what we want. That's absolutely above everything else.
Item who thought?
Tiptoft's ordinances state clearly that the object of the joust is not to kill your opponent, but to break your lance by striking him. The knight who's broken the most lances at the end of the day wins.
Good morning, gentlemen. You must be David. I'm Mike.
The 4 would-be knights have joined Mike at their training centre near Maidenhead to see 2 stuntmen demonstrate a fake joust.
Good to meet you. Nice to meet you. We're going to talk about jousting, so let's have a look at one first, and then we've got something to relate. Do you want to come and stand here? That's a joust.
Cool.
That's your objective. That's what you're wanting to do, is you're wanting to smash your lance on the other guy. If you look more closely at these broken spears, you can see they've been prepped. They've been doctored, so in order to make them break more readily in a spectacular shower of splinters.
Taking a bold leap of faith, Mike abandons balsa-wood in favour of a real medieval lance. This was made of solid wood, and that's not all. It was tipped with a vicious spike, the coronel.
A solid wooden spear. Okay. I think it's going to break. It's untested.
I see.
Good. Because it's the great mystery. Nobody knows. Jousting was a popular sport for 300 or 400 years, and we don't really know the issues.
It looks way intimidating.
Mike was saying there, the real lances are going to sound great when they smack. I was going, yeah, kind of like bone cracking kind of smacking.
No, it's going to sound more like this.
Yeah.
When jousting first developed, it reflected the supreme military technology of the age. It's a story that started nearly 1,000 years ago. Europe was torn apart by barbarian hordes. Then, in the 11th century, one group rode onto the scene with brute force. The Normans. These French-speaking warriors were the first knights. Across Europe and even the Near East, they mercilessly crushed their enemies, using a military technology that no one could withstand.
And it's the idea of fighting with a couched lance, with your lance tucked underneath your arm. And you have to fight as a block, a huge block of knights. And it's the French, the Normans, who perfect this technique. And it's totally new, and it takes Europe by storm.
Couching the spear under the arm, making spear, man and horse one solid projectile, one fixed linkage. It's an image of the sort of the panzer divisions of medieval knighthood crashing through everything.
The Normans' couched lance wasn't their only breakthrough. In perfecting their tactics, the Normans developed the ultimate training exercise. This early form of the tournament became a way of life. They called it the tournay.
The early tournament is purely and simply a military exercise. To perform the feat of fighting with couched lances, you had to fight as a battalion. That was the only way you were going to be successful. You are training for war, pure and simple.
There is a first-hand account of how a tournay worked. It comes from the biography of Sir William Marshall, whose effigy lies in the Temple Church in the heart of London. William started as a penniless page boy, but when he finally fought in a tournay, he discovered he had a gift. In this training exercise, hundreds of knights would divide into 2 teams and battle to gain control over a wide area. But William didn't fight like a chivalrous hero from an Arthurian tale. He was a ruthless tactician, doing whatever it took to win, even if it meant ambushing lone knights. Many men died in tournays, but it was less deadly than real war, because there were incentives to capture your enemy alive. If you did, his horse and armor were yours, and he would have to pay you ransom money to be set free. The spoils of the tournay made William Marshall rich and famous. He became an earl and built elaborate castles like Pembroke in Wales, where our men will soon joust. The early tournament could transform a poor man into the most powerful and well-known lord of his time. But centuries would pass before the chaotic tournay would look anything like the controlled one-on-one joust our men are training for.
What makes this safe is the armour, and here is the armour.
To give them the best chance of survival against the solid spiked lances, our knights will use authentic jousting armour. Each suit has been made to measure for its owner. To a medieval knight, armour was among his most prized possessions, costing the equivalent of a house today.
The first thing is to just get your first reaction, to feel it, find which is your bits, see what you think about it. It's Christmas.
Every element conforms precisely to the wearer's body. In total, there are over 100 plates of metal, the largest and heaviest being the chest plate, or cuirass.
Oh my God, it's pretty heavy.
Over 280 rivets, 18 hinges and 24 leather straps hold the suit together, giving the wearer full range of movement.
I can see now why they had to take so many measurements.
Yeah.
These suits cost £8,000 each and took 3 separate workshops nearly 600 man-hours to make. Chief armourer to the project is Emrys, one of the few people in the world who can make authentic armour. His usual clients are museums or reenactors.
I've been making armour for 32 years, and this is the first time in 32 years I've actually made armour for the purpose for which it was originally intended, which was to keep people safe, because it's being used for real, which is fantastic. Quite exciting. And a little bit worrying too, because if I get it wrong, people are going to get hurt, you know. I've got to work out the exact angle that the lance can strike the visor without actually entering the sight. If I get it wrong, and they get in at that angle, then there's a danger of the lance going right into the eyes. And since this is real jousting, I got to get it right first time.
Plate armour was a great technological advance made relatively late in the Middle Ages, around 1400. Metalsmiths in Italy started the revolution, learning to turn steel into large, lightweight plates. It brought jousting to a new level because it suddenly became possible to fully encase a man in lightweight, super hard steel.
Just step into it.
To soften any blows, the knights wear their armour over a thick layer of padding called an arming doublet.
Then you should be able to get
It's a shame he's so tall.
As David, the Scottish horse trainer, discovers, there's a price to pay for the protection offered by the helmet. Limited vision.
I mean, I know you can see further than I thought, but I don't like the fact I can't just turn my head on its own. You have to sort of shift your whole body.
Can you see me here?
Yeah, just about.
And you see, don't worry about your close vision. What you need to do is you need to look at the guy at the end of the tilt. So then that's now simulating a lance strike, you see.
When are you going to start hitting me? Call that a hit?
You feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, oh, delighted.
Weighed down by 100 pounds of armour, policeman Rick feels the effects.
It's really heavy. Pushes down on your shoulders.
Sweating under all that metal, how is it possible to move, let alone fight? There's a legend that in the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, French knights were so heavy in their armour that their horses got stuck in the mud. The men fell on their backs and couldn't get up. English soldiers casually butchered them where they lay. But how true is this story? How cumbersome is armour? To find out, Mike challenges the men to perform athletic feats in armour. The experiment shows that men can be agile in armour. It proves that the story of the French knights immobilised at Agincourt must be a myth.
Excellent. You just dived on your head and you're still alive. That's good.
But our knights are only beginners, and the heavy weight is straining their joints.
Excellent, David. Really good. Dive, dive, dive!
Policeman Rick pushes it too far. As he rolls, his ankle gives way, and he needs medical attention.
I twisted my ankle now.
You've twisted your ankle. OK.
Rick has sprained his ankle. An injury like this will hold him back in training and could ruin his chances for the tournament. It's day 3, and the men are now going to meet their steeds.
Just take her.
Just take it for a nice little steady circle. Let's have a look. Steady. Be good.
It's an American. Danny, you'll find it a lot better if you sit right back, put your shoulders right back, so you really sit in an armchair. That's it.
The traditional belief is that a knight rode a giant horse to support the weight of his armour. But the records of horse merchants indicate knights preferred smaller, fiery horses imported from Spain. Rick is about to discover that a feisty horse is also a dangerous horse.
Ooh,
Whoa.
that's a good start.
Steady. Steady.
With his right ankle already sprained, Rick's now injured his left foot.
It's like he laid a head on my toe and jammed my toe back.
Oh, I see.
If it starts getting unbearable.
Yeah, you could pull it. It's okay.
You can shout as much as you like. You've got an odd-shaped toe. Is that normal?
Nope.
Your big toe, you've dislocated it.
Huh?
They've barely begun, and already policeman Rick's chances of completing training and competing in the tournament look poor.
I'm not going to pop it back in here because you can track nerves.
No,
So where's your nearest casualty?
just down the road.
Yeah?
Rick's dislocated toe will take 2 weeks to heal. But danger was all part of a knight's life. Here at the Wallace Collection in London, Mike Loades can investigate the weapons and armour that knights used in war and tournaments. But seeing these silent relics isn't enough. Mike must look for the clues that will tell him how real knights trained to use them.
We're looking now at the Romance of Alexander.
So he consults medieval literature scholar Marion Turner. She shows him a 14th century manuscript called The Romance of Alexander.
One of the really interesting things about this manuscript is that you have all these stories of romance, of great deeds of prowess, of going to foreign lands, of fighting great battles. But then in the marginalia, you have the details of everyday life. You have knights learning to fight and joust.
Really quite mundane.
Foot combat, all kinds of things like that.
I mean, that's not...
In the margins, a unique drawing.
There it is.
Down in this corner. Can we see it a bit?
These sketches are the only visual evidence for how young knights trained.
That is almost more interesting than the cart. If we look here at this...
The knights are running at a shield on a post called a quintain. There are markings on the shield that catch Mike's eye.
What we can clearly see here is that that's a slit. Why? Why has it got a letterbox?
And the knights are riding a wheeled horse, presumably because, as Rick discovered, riding living horses is dangerous enough without lances.
You are going to be wearing a shield. For most jousting, we see them wearing shields. This is the most typical type. It's got a concave surface. The other element it has is it has this écranche. So these are known as écranche shields, this cutaway. And this also becomes somewhere that you rest the lance in.
Now Mike must discover how the wooden horse in the manuscript actually works in training. It will be the first time anyone has used these historic devices in 500 years. Against doctor's orders, policeman Rick is sticking with training and volunteers to go first. He presumes it'll be safe because he won't be using his feet.
That's how we're jogging now.
I know, I think you need to go as fast as you can. I think you really need to get that. So Nick, take over.
1, 2, 3.
Whoa! We all try to kill me.
Lucky Rick.
Lucky it was my right side this time. The impact was pretty formidable, so I guess when we're really going on the horses, it's going to be worse than that.
See, I think that this rope is there to stop any sliding.
Yeah, otherwise the rope wouldn't make any sense.
Otherwise the rope doesn't make any sense, and that's clear that it's there.
While watching Cowboy Dan, Mike discovers what the open slit in the quintain shield was for.
Yeah.
Whoa. There goes the saddle. Hey there, fellas.
What was particularly interesting to me about that run that you just did, Dan, was just as you came to make impact, you closed your eyes, which is natural human instinct. That, at least for me, has made sense of this slit in here, that it is an observation point where I can get a view of what you're doing that I can't see from any other angle.
It broke.
That gives you an idea of the sort of level of impact that it's going to be.
Pretty sobering. Nice and sharp.
Right in the divisor.
The sharp end of a splintered lance is a grim reminder of the hazards the men face. There's a manuscript from the 1470s known as the Beauchamp Pageant. It describes a common danger in the joust.
One of the jousters is being struck in the helm, and the visor from the impact is being shot up. And this was the great hazard in jousting. We know it happened to Henry VIII, a different type of helm, but it happened to Henry VIII a few years later. His helm wasn't properly secured, the visor went up, and he got a face full of splinters.
In a few days, our knights will take turns trying to break lances on each other at the tournament. To train for this, they ride at a quintain that spins.
About too long.
Too early?
Just leave it late. Be prepared to leave it late.
The final piece of the training puzzle is to ride with the visor down. Their vision will now be severely impaired.
get that dance down too early, then it's just going high, low, and you're not going to hit anything. So you've really got to hold off from the instinct to drop the lance.
Your vision seems to change as you're cantering along, so you might be on target, but then you lose it for an instant. And I think that's going to be probably a factor whether you hit your target or not. But I saw David was doing pretty well. He's still hitting the quintain pretty well with it. He's going to be the man. If he hits that accurately, tournament day.
They'll find out soon enough who is the best knight. The tournament is only 2 days away. The men are becoming accomplished fighters, but there were other skills that a successful knight required. Paintings from the Victorian period romanticized knights as dashing lovers, but evidence of this heroic ideal dates much further back. Legends of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table appeared early, around the year 1100. These stories had a profound effect on real knights, who were expected to live up to new chivalric ideals.
We all know, even now, who Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot are. I mean, they're still part of our traditional storytelling. But to knights in the medieval period, they were real, genuine figures, and they felt that they were historic figures.
Arthurian legends were violent tales of good triumphing over evil. Valiant heroes would fight treacherous knights and eventually kill them. But what makes these stories revolutionary is that the knights were not fighting for war, they were fighting for love.
An extraordinary thing happens, really, towards the end of the 11th century, and it is a whole new development in the way people think. You get the troubadours from the south of France introducing the idea of courtly love, the idea of romance. It's the first time ever that men have been encouraged to be in love with women. I mean, that's a totally anti-classical idea. The Romans didn't approve of that. The idea that you put your lady on a pedestal, the idea that you treated her well, that's all something new. And that's something that's going to transform the way knights think about themselves.
By the 1300s, the courtly love revolution had not only transformed the knight, but also his tournament. Aristocratic women began to watch, looking for knights to be their champions. And knights looked for powerful women to become their patrons. This transformed the mass brawl of the tourney into a stadium-based showcase.
By the 14th century, they're starting to move more into display. It's still the inheritance of training for war, training for their function on the battlefield. But by the 14th century, we're wanting to see more one-on-one, imitative of the allegorical contests in Arthurian romances, where it's one-on-one. Because knighthood was very much a cult of individual prowess.
Knights who excelled at jousting became international superstars. And high-status women didn't just sit in the stands. They presented their champions with tokens called favours. And ultimately, just fighting at tournament wouldn't be enough to win a lady's patronage.
So many other aspects of knighthood develop. Knighthood has always been about being a truthful person with integrity and decency and being someone with courtesy. And more, a knight also has to be someone who can speak well, who can write poetry, who can make speeches to his lady, and who can dance with his lady.
And side 1, and 2, and riverenza.
As in a real tournament, our knights will compete in a medieval dance. Dance instructor and historian Diana Scrivener's job is to teach them to impress the ladies.
A-OK. Now, can we do that with the music?
For a knight, dancing was as important a skill as fighting. Attracting a wealthy female sponsor could give you the edge at tournaments. Our men will have to learn when to make eye contact, how to hold hands, and to move with confidence and grace. The finest dancer will become the ladies' champion.
Once you get into the physicality of the dance, it adds a great dimension, which is obviously not apparent if we're looking at a fairly dry manuscript on paper. So you get the most wonderful opportunity to be passionate while engaging in this marvellous symmetry of movement. So you get a 360-degree marriage of all the components, the etiquette, the music, the movement, everything, the courtliness, the courtesía, the gliding movements, the gentle hand clasps. It's a whole embodiment.
So you just keep eye contact with them for the one here, and then you flirt with the next woman?
Of course.
Okay.
Palm to palm. At the moment, it probably doesn't have any great sense or relevance because you haven't got the women, you've only had me to contend with. I think you'll find it very meaningful when you're with your ladies, besides the aspect of the competitive aspect too. All right, so yeah, that's good. That's really good.
With only a day's training left, it's the last chance for the men to sharpen their skills for the tournament.
Beautifully done. Yes! I would still say that it's open and anybody can win it. I mean, to see David run down and hit that quintain, it's a thrilling sight. Yes. Spectacular, and he's on the button every time.
Horse trainer David is emerging as a favourite. But Army Major Nick May has brute strength behind him.
Nick is looking solid and steady as well. His style is coming good, he's getting a good rhythm and coming down and finding that. Dan also is starting to look very, very good, and he has a lovely rhythm.
Smaller than the others, Cowboy Dan is nimble on horseback. Only the policeman Rick is lagging behind, still suffering from his injuries.
Rick's still having a little bit of trouble getting the line with the horse, and he's having trouble finding the crunch, the slot in the shield with his spear. He's having some trouble with that.
The knights, with all their horses and armour, moved to Pembroke Castle in Wales. This mighty fortress, with walls over 10 feet thick, was home to many great tournament knights, including William Marshall. Tomorrow, the first authentic joust in centuries will take place. But first, the time has come for the men to prove themselves on the dance floor. The knights have never met these ladies before. Hopefully, they will sweep them off their feet. In the Middle Ages, knights would dance hoping to win a rich patron. It could be as important as winning a joust. In our dance, only one of the 4 men will emerge as the ladies' champion. Our warriors are now locked in a very different kind of competition. On this battlefield, gracefulness is more important than brute strength. When their hands touch, the women look for tenderness and confidence. The most important moment is when the dancers' eyes meet each other. A great deal can be said without a word. The men have to make these women feel special, but an awkward step or the wrong kind of glance can count against them.
All in all, I think we were pretty impressed.
David looked. He did look.
Nick looks at me and David looks at me.
Rick would look at me and Dan was shy looking, but he would look.
Yeah. I think he was by far the most comfortable with it, and
yeah,
every time he walked past him, he was keeping eye contact, but he was also playing with it.
The choice of the ladies' champion is up for discussion and won't be revealed until the start of the tournament.
And we're all individual
Exactly.
men, and we all have our
individual taste.
And that's what it comes down to.
What a night is. So there you are.
Yeah.
Knight in shining armour.
Yeah.
Tournament day has arrived. Everything our knights have been taught will now be put to the test. They will fight like real medieval warriors, an event no one has seen in centuries. However, in the tournament, men fought for love, not war. And one of the men has impressed the lady of the tournament.
The lady of the joust has selected one of you to carry her honour. Come forward, Daniel Worth, and collect her favour.
Cowboy Dan's victory won't score him points in the joust, but he knows that the most important member of the audience has singled him out. Her confidence could inspire him. For 2 weeks, our knights have anticipated the dangers of a real joust. In medieval times, most injuries and deaths were caused by strikes to the head or falls from horses. Today, our knights will find out for themselves what it feels like to be struck by a solid medieval lance. Each man will joust against the others 3 times over the course of the day. Anyone who breaks at least a foot off the tip of their lance scores 1 point. At the end of the day, the man who's broken the most lances wins. For the first time in centuries, 2 men are about to joust for real. Plagued by injuries in training, policeman Rick Pellicano has struggled to get this far. His opponent is Scottish horse trainer David Sheerin, who has become the clear favourite.
Pass them their spears!
The pressure is on. Will they hold their nerve and be the first to experience full impact? A miss, no score for either knight. Slow motion shows both riders are too far apart. Their lances can't even reach each other, let alone make a head-on strike. In the textbook approach, both knights should ride so close to the wooden barrier that their stirrups scrape against it. We still don't know the consequences of a full-on impact. Next to face danger is Major Nick May. In training, he produced strong, solid strikes, but now he's facing a target that fights back.
Okay. Close the visors!
It's the cowboy Dan Worth. As the ladies' favourite, Dan has a psychological advantage. The women in the stands are cheering for him.
Listen! That is the first break of the day. It is a spectacular break. To me!
Looking at the clash again, the army major has a perfect approach, his lance slotting neatly in the écranche in his shield. He also rides close to the barrier, so his angle of strike is nearly head-on. As a result, his lance breaks over 3 feet down the shaft. 1 break to Major Nick May. He stays on to face policeman Rick Pellicano.
Lacey! Alley!
Hours of training at the Quintain pay off for Rick. Riding smoothly and steadily, he brings his lance down directly on his opponent's visor. A blow to the head was considered the finest a knight could deliver. And if it weren't for the protection offered by Emrys's jousting helmet, Major Nick May might have been decapitated.
Felt great. Felt great. Let's do about 12 more.
Elated by the fact that their armor and lances are working, the men throw caution to the wind. As the scores are tallied, Mike's joust is bringing a lost sport back to life. The solid wood lances are breaking, and the armor is protecting their bodies. And surprisingly, it is policeman Rick Pellicano who's taken the lead. His persistent, level-headed riding has earned him 4 broken lances. Horse trainer David Sheerin is right behind him, with 3 breaks. But Army Major Nick May hasn't fared as well.
Oh yeah, top of the world. Missed all my runs, gleaming.
With only 3 runs left in the tournament and only 1 break, the Army Major can no longer win. Cowboy Dan, who only has 2 broken lances, must break on this next run to stay in the competition.
Right, Dan has to get this.
Right.
He has to get it.
No, is
There's
he doing
no
it?
doubt about it.
Easy there, Auntie, easy. Close the visors. Passed on their spears. Lacey! Ali! Come on, Dan!
Cowboy Dan has done it.
What a rush!
But there appears to be a problem.
Right, but the assistant marshal informs me from his position he could see that Dan's strike hit the cantle of the saddle. By the rules of John Tiptoft, that break is disallowed.
The cowboy, like the Army Major, can no longer win. Policeman Rick holds the lead.
You deserve that.
All eyes are now on horse trainer David. If he breaks, he will be tied for first place. David's riding skills allow him to concentrate on his upper body. He fluidly drops his lance into the shield and brings the tip onto Nick's chest in one motion. Only a skilled horseman can be so precise. David knows he is now level in first place.
That was a good, clean break on the shield for David.
David and Rick have both broken 4 lances.
It's not bad. So this will be the last run of the tournament. If Rick breaks on this run, he will be the clear winner.
The horse trainer's out of runs. He can only watch and hope Rick won't break. Despite his injuries, the policeman has proved a steady rider with a cool head. But now the pressure is on. Only a break will do. He rides against his fellow American, Cowboy Dan Worth.
Close the visors. Pass them their spears. Lucy!
Rick has done it, but his angle of strike wasn't head-on. Will the broken end of his lance be long enough to count?
It's just the end.
There it is, look, and it's not very long.
Right. It looks a bit short. It's a short one. This could not be a break. This might not be a break.
Just under the line.
It's on the line. I award the break to Rick.
Told you this, sir. I told you.
You're right, man. I don't know
You
what's...
just need to listen to me. You just need to listen to me.
By awarding that final break to Rick, he also gives him the competition!
God, he's crying. This is the guy.
Always nearly crying.
Don't do that, or you're going to make me do it.
Oh, it's joy. Don't worry about it.
If Rick were a knight in the Middle Ages, his victory would bring him more than just a purse of gold. He would become famous, and for a knight, this prestige was even more useful than money. Fame opened doors into noble society. For a knight like Rick, this could lead to everything from a career at court to marriage into an aristocratic family. But the irony was that late in the medieval period, the knight's days were numbered.
The truth was, by the late Middle Ages, they were a dying class, and their usefulness on the battlefield had long been eclipsed by massed forces of disciplined infantry and by gunpowder. And this was the last gasp of a dying breed.
Richard Pellicano, come forward and claim your prize from the Lady of the Joust.
Developed from war into sport, tournaments left behind a powerful legacy of fearless men. Yet through the influence of women, the tournament also created the first romantic heroes. It's a rich, complex image of manhood, as inspiring as it is spectacular. It remains woven into the fabric of our culture to this day.
Right, are you a shining knight? See if you can beat our jousting champions at channel4.com/history. Next tonight, Ricky Tomlinson is brave enough to say yes to the England job. Mike Bassett, England manager. He knows his 4-4-2s from his 4-3-3s.